What is going on, guys? The break is finally over, and today we are gonna get some Habs hockey. Finally. So here's a quick refresher, since we just had a pretty long break with the All-Star break and then the Habs 5-day break. We are currently sitting at 28, 18, and 5, which is good enough for the fourth spot, the first wild card in the Atlantic Division. We are tied with Boston, but they get us on the tiebreaker. Toronto still has one game in hand. Boston has no games in hand. In our last 10, the Habs are 6-4. And in their last 3 games, we had a win against Columbus. Boom! A loss against Philly and a win against Arizona in overtime. Boom! I love it, guys. So, and now we are upcoming to a 5-game homestand. So it'll be really good to improve our home record with these 5 games coming up. We're playing some teams that are currently sitting out of a playoff spot, and then we're facing some who are very good teams that are in a playoff spot. But this is the NHL. Every team is good, and you have to put your best effort forward, especially here on out, because it is going to be a sprint right to the end of the season, and it is going to be a very tight playoff race. So 5-game homestand. We got New Jersey today, Edmonton tomorrow, then we have Anaheim, Winnipeg, and the last game of the homestand is our second game of the season against the Toronto Maple Leafs. I cannot wait for that one. I just really want to see how we match up against the Leafs, especially now where they have Jake Muzzin. And if you haven't already seen my video on the Jake Muzzin trade, feel free to check that one out. So we got some news here. Byron has served his 3-game suspension, so he will be back against New Jersey. That is great. We also got a Juleson injury update. He is currently assigned to Laval, but he's out with an injury. There was a lot of speculation going around that he had a serious eye injury, and there are even some speculation that he could have a career-ending eye injury. But this is yet again another lesson that you cannot believe any speculation coming from the Montreal media. Unless you hear something from Elliot Friedman, Bob McKenzie, Pierre LeBrun, or Darren Dreger, or the Montreal Canadiens officially, then what's coming out, all it is rumors and speculation, and it's likely not true. There was reports that he could have a career-ending injury, and the Habs were basically forced to come out and say, due to the privacy of our player, we don't have any further comment at this point, but what we do have to say is he has an eye injury, he needs some rest. It's likely, or they're hoping that he can play this season, but if not, they still expect him to recover fully. Now, I will say, as a fan, when you see that speculation come up, Juleson may have a career-ending injury, it does make you nervous, because you think, what if, oh my God, what if that's true? But in these moments, we need to remind ourselves that these false reports and rumors that's all it really is. And we can't get ourselves too worked up until we hear official news from the team. So it was great to hear that it's not a career-ending injury. And hopefully he'll have a good recovery, and we'll see him back on the ice this season. He was on his way to becoming a very important player for the Montreal Canadiens, and he still will. He was a huge reason why the Montreal Canadiens were able to survive Shea Weber's injury to start the season. He played fantastic for us and played a lot of important minutes. And he got injured in a very fluky way with those 2 pucks to the same area of the face within minutes of each other. That was pretty harsh. So some other news, Niemi will be starting against the New Jersey Devils because Price is suspended due to not attending the All-Star game. Kind of worked out because we have a back-to-back. Price likely wouldn't have played this game anyway, but McNiven's been called up to be the backup for the game today. And then tomorrow, obviously, we'll have Price against Connor McDavid and the Edmonton Oilers. Both of these games are afternoon games. Make sure not to miss that. Yeah, so another thing here is Bergevin, Weber, and Julien were left out of the Writing Association's midway point award nominations. Not going to talk too much about this. I do think it's a bit ridiculous that Bergevin wasn't mentioned as a possible GM of the year, considering the absolute home runs he made in the offseason with getting Armia, the Domi trade, the Tatar trade, as well as some good signings. and basically calling out the team as having poor attitude and fixing it over the summer. He definitely should be in contention for GM of the Year, and I think he will be by the end of the season. Weber was left out of the Norris list, as well as one of the other awards, which involves a player returning from adversity. But I think if Weber continues to play the way that he has so far, he's been an absolute beast defensively, and he's putting up really good offensive numbers, specifically with his goals, and he's generating offense with that shot, even when he doesn't scores. When he directs that shot to the net, scrambles happen and potential goals happen. So if he continues to play this way, I think he will finish quite high in Norris votes. Maybe he won't win it, but I think he'll end up maybe even in the top 5 for Norris votes by the end of the season if he keeps up what he's been doing so far. And then Julien was not mentioned in Coach of the Year. Same thing for him. If this team keeps up the way they will, I think Julien will be up for that award as well, which would be great to see. The team deserves some recognition after what they've done this season with the quick turnaround. Also, the trade deadline is approaching. It's going to be a very interesting one for Marc Bergevin. He's known for some interesting trades at the offseason. He's been with the Montreal Canadiens so long now, 7 years, that each trade deadline he's kind of done something different. There's been a lot of people talking about or wondering if he'll go for the size and the grit like he did a couple years ago at the deadline. I do not think that will be the case. Back then, a few years ago, before the playoffs, that roster really didn't have much size outside of Shea Weber and Dale Weiss and Shaw, of course. But I think this team is big enough and tough enough and prepared for the playoffs if they are to make it. Shea Weber, physical presence. Jeff Petrie has become a very serious physical presence. Obviously, Andrew Shaw. Yoel Armia is a big body. We got Nikolai Delorier back there, another big body. There's no need for Montreal to really add grit, and I don't think he will do that. I also don't think Bergevin's going to be in the rental market. It doesn't make sense to bring in rental players and ship out future assets considering the stage the Montreal Canadiens are in. And I would prefer if Bergevin didn't sell any players, specifically guys like Jordy Ben, who I think would be very valuable to us in the playoffs. I'd be okay maybe if you got a clear roster spot and sell off a guy like Charles Hudon or maybe Matt Pekka, but for the most part, we got to stay the course and I think go into the playoffs with the roster we currently have, unless Bergevin is able to make a great deal for a player, maybe a defenseman, who would not only be with the Habs for this playoff run, but would stick with us long term. Jake Muzzin was one of those guys, but he has gone to the Leafs. There's been talk about Duncan Keith. Now, despite him being 35 years old, he is a multiple Norris winning defenseman. He plays upwards of 25 minutes a night. His offensive stats are a little bit down, but he's very, very sound defensively. He also paired with Shea Weber in the Olympics multiple times, and they played fantastic together. Duncan Keith is a lefty. Maybe he's on a very good contract, $5.5 million, I think, for the next 4 years. It would end at 39 years old. Now, there's not many players that's that old that I'd be willing for Bergevin to ship out future assets for. But if he can make a very good deal, considering Keith is old, I mean, it'd still be costly, but it shouldn't be as costly as a younger defenseman or a young defenseman with high potential. Bergevin would have to bring down the price for Keith a little bit to make it acceptable, but Keith is that good, and maybe reuniting with Shea Weber on Montreal could put his career back on track despite him being 35. He is an upper echelon of Canadian defensemen, and that would be very interesting. He's one of very few guys that old on defense that I would be totally okay with Bergevin getting. But again, you don't want to trade way too much for him or overpay. I don't even want to get into what that trade might look like, but if you can get him for a fair price without giving up a first-round pick or multiple prospects, I think that would be acceptable, especially because he wouldn't be a rental. He'd be with the team for a few more years. Yeah, that's about it, guys. So we got a game today against New Jersey. Should be good. I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm going to get back into doing the reaction videos. Feel free to get in on the discussion down below in the comments. Love chatting with you guys. Cheers, guys. Don't forget to subscribe if you like my videos, and you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Scotian Canadian. Go Habs, go, baby. Can't wait for some hot.